This video is about graft numbers. You're going to think, well, that's great. That's exactly what I want to hear about from Dr. Lamb. I want to hear, is he going to do a 3,000 graft case? Is he going to do a 4,000 graft? I've seen some things where people are going to Turkey and they're getting 4,800 grafts. They're getting 5,000 grafts, 6,000 grafts. First of all, no way in heck. Second of all, what are you doing? Are you destroying the hair? At what cost? Because the first thing I do when I look at a patient is what is going to happen in the next 10 years? Listen to my video or watch my video on donor preservation. So it is more important of what I keep for you for your next 10 years than what has been taken away. One of my friends, I just had dinner with him on Tuesday night. His friend of his went to Turkey and had a 4,800 graft case. They've decimated his donor hair. I looked at him, he's a Norwood 6 pattern, a 5-6 pattern, which means they've harvested right up to the edge of his baldness, and then they had to take beard to get him those numbers. First of all, I don't even know if they've got those numbers for him, but if they've got those numbers for him, he will have a disaster within 6 to 10 years where those grafts are going to fail. The scars will be exposed in the backside. He'll have nothing to fix further donor problems because that's going to start falling downwards, and he's going to have this transplanted zone that won't match. But guess what? The people he went to, they don't care, because if we can give you huge numbers, then you're all happy. But do you really want to look ridiculous in 5 to 10 years where you've got nothing left because someone offered you some insane graft count? Now, I'm going to tell you something against the grain. I don't charge per graft. I don't care the graft number. And there's so many factors. So donor preservation is the most important thing that I'm not going to go over again because it's in my other video that I shot a few days ago. But there's so many factors beyond just numbers. And I need to tell you so many things just to give you some ideas. Why don't I charge per numbers? Because I look at how can I preserve the donor and get you the result I need and not worry about, am I getting you the right numbers? Am I going to get you 2,000 grafts, 3,000 grafts? Let me give you some examples. Grafts, follicular units are grafts that grow, are actual grafts that grow out in 1, 2, 3, or 4 hairs. So in other words, one follicular unit either has 1 hair, 2 hairs, 3 hairs, or 4 hairs naturally. As I told you, or actually I may have not mentioned this, I may have mentioned in my other video, the short version, but one of my hair technicians worked for a major hair clinic in Dallas, where his clinic told them, cut all these 2-hair grafts into single 1-hair grafts so that we make our numbers. That's absurd, absolutely stupid, because when you dissect 2-hair follicular units into single hairs, number one, the survival is far worse. Number two, there's no visual density. So it makes no sense, because I would much, much rather have 1,000 sites with two hairs than 2,000 sites with 1 hairs. They're the same number of hairs, but the fewer sites with more graft follicles per, or hairs per follicle actually looks denser. So the result looks much better. The survival is much better. And how about someone that has mainly 3-hair follicular units, and let's say I only gave them 1,000 grafts, just for example. That math of that is 3,000 hairs. What if I gave them 1,200 2-hair grafts? That is 12 times 2 is 2,400. So I'm actually giving more hairs with fewer grafts. So the idea here is the grafts are not everything. If I've got someone with really flimsy fine hairs, even if I give them 3,000 grafts, it won't be as good as someone that has 1,500 grafts. If I take 1,500 grafts and I spread it over the whole head into the crown, it won't be as powerful as if I concentrate those. What's much more powerful is, number one, donor preservation, which I've alluded to several times, and that's the most important thing. But also you want an aesthetic result that will age well for you. So all these factors are what you're paying me for. So when I'm focused, not only am I preserving the donor, but I'm looking at how can I maximally leverage those grafts. So I encourage you to watch, if you're doing the crown, to listen to my crown video, my crown lecture video of how I take one graft and I think about every site where I'm going to place, because how you position those grafts not only helps you figure out future aging issues, but it also helps you leverage it. So what does leveraging mean? So just an example, there's something called the cascade effect, which essentially means that if I place a graft in the upper arc of the crown, that graft is able to cover and go down over the bottom arc, whereas a graft in the bottom arc only has a shorter travel distance. So that one graft can actually act like 5 grafts. So I have to position more on the upper arc arc than the lower arc for more aesthetic impact. But if I make it all weighted, let's say I put 80% up there because that's what I want to get the leverage on, and I don't put enough on the bottom, it will look lopsided, it won't work. You have to have enough balance. So the mistake when I teach junior people, and I have a beginner course I've run for 15 years, teaching this sort of art of cascade effect, is for them to do too much on one side. So I rather, as a person starting out in the first 5 years, just evenly place those grafts. But for me, I leverage my being in the business for 20 years, thinking about how can I place a graft here and there. Another example is a central forelock. Central forelock is critical. If this part is weak after a transplant, you still look bald. So I may put more density of those grafts. I may have my staff select out the 3 hair grafts I've harvested, place those more into the central forelock for bigger aesthetic impact. I may look at the person, they come in, they've got actually much more hollower frontal temporal angles, which are right here, and I may have to use stronger grafts. Now, you don't want too strong grafts in the front because that area would look fake, but I would say, okay, let's prioritize and I'm going to make denser sites in those areas. So leveraging how to design it is important. Now, clearly, if I give you 100 grafts and you've got a huge bald area, it's not going to work. So I'm not talking about cheating you out of grafts. I'm not talking about giving you almost no grafts. What I'm talking about is donor preservation, leveraging those grafts, and not talking about some big numbers, because social media and TikTok has gotten you in love with some insane numbers. So you can brag to your friends, how many grafts you got? I got 3,000 grafts. I got a 4,000 graft case. I've got a 2,500. Oh, you only got 2,500 grafts? Well, why does your 2,500 grafts have a full head of hair and mine looks like garbage? Or, hey, you know what? I got 4,800 grafts. It looks fantastic, but now I've got a disaster in 10 years where you don't know it's going to be a problem because you don't know they've completely destroyed your donor and taken everything. So graft numbers are something I don't want you to focus on. It's not because I'm being evasive. It's because I am focused on donor preservation results. And so when you think about graft numbers, you don't even know what that number means. The only reason you have any vague understanding is because of some garbage TikTok image that you've seen that has made you think, oh, I need to know this number. That number has some value to me. That number should have no value to you.